My name is Geno Samuel, and welcome back to Discographies, Yes, where I'll be telling you about what happens in every studio release from Yes, so you don't have to listen to it. Listen to me instead, please. Now, after Rick Wakeman left the band for the fourth time, the band kind of went their separate ways for a little while. John Anderson retreated to Hawaii, Steve Howe returned to England, Alan White went back to his adoptive home in Seattle, and Chris Squire and Billy Sherwood stayed in California and began writing new songs together, hoping to make an album out of them. Squire and Sherwood's personal music project eventually became the band Conspiracy, but this was a bit before Conspiracy properly formed. The new management for Yes wanted to hear all of the music that everyone was working on individually, and upon hearing the stuff that Squire and Sherwood were working on, they said that they would be a lot stronger if they were reworked as Yes tracks. So Sherwood started mailing early versions of the songs he was working on to John, and he seemed to like them, so he contributed vocals from his home studio in Hawaii. Alan White also got sent the songs to work on, and he liked them too, so he flew over to Los Angeles to record the drum tracks for them. And all of a sudden, these songs started to sound more like Yes, but they were a far cry from prog rock, and if anything, this kind of ended up sounding like a return to more commercial sensibilities of the 80s. Would it be out of line to call Billy Sherwood the second coming of Trevor Rabin? Steve Howe, for one, was totally not on board with the new music and did his best to contribute as little as possible. It seems that most of the guitar work and keyboard work was done by Billy, actually. Steve Howe said that their more commercial stuff would lose fans, while others said that they needed to get on the radio. So a lot of these songs were in the works for a music project that was not Yes, but it involved Yes members, and then was all of a sudden turned into Yes. But since this wasn't originally music for the band, Yes, it didn't really sound like typical Yes. I just described both 90125 and Open Your Eyes. But as you may know, I'm very fond of 90125 and Rabin era as a whole, and I think the return of classic Yes from a year before this on Keys to Ascension 1 and 2, that was kind of a lackluster contribution. So maybe this album won't be all that bad. Well, let's get into it, shall we? The opening track. A New State of Mind opens pretty powerfully, with the full band doing this almost King Crimson 21st Century Schizoid Man kind of rock riff. The mix is great, so I'm really happy about that. The singing comes in pretty early with the opening verse. Long time no see. Absolutely huge vocal harmonies that sound so damn good. Waiting for the moment when the moment has been waiting all the time. Damn, bam, bam. So now the three singers of the group are Anderson, Squire, and Sherwood, because Howe was giving this album a wide berth, thankfully. The song has a pretty slow groove and powerful but not too fast. Howe shows up though intermittently in the back, delivering this crappy steel guitar bit, filling up the void when it's not necessary at all because the arrangement is quite dense and full of body already, and he just messes up the mood. As you do. The big vocals stay pretty consistent throughout, and they're the kind that wasn't really heard since Talk, and I'd say that they're comparable in quality. In the chorus, they do multiple overlapping melodies with Chris and Billy doing one line and John doing the other. In addition, the music exhibits this pseudo-60s psychedelia vibe on this song and many other songs on the album. And the mood kind of reminds me of the songs on Marillion.com by Marillion. After some runs of the verses and choruses, the band settle into an interesting finish for the song. It gets all ethereal for a bit, and sitar delightfully noodles away, further contributing to this almost Beatles-esque musical idea. But this is actually a false ending, as the band all of a sudden play and then they fall back into the previous groove. They combine some riffs and motifs and vocal melodies towards the end in fairly classic Yes fashion, and then they lead back into another finish, and this time it's for real. The instrumentation kind of falls apart and abstracts, creating a nice little ethereal section, without delivering an actually good little gentle slidey theme at the very end. Pretty good song, I'd say. Next is the title track, Open Your Eyes, which was largely done by just Chris and Billy for their Conspiracy project. Also, Steve Porcaro from Toto plays the keyboards on this one, and his contributions were a carryover from the failed conspiracy project that they were working on. The very opening sliding up guitar sound, it sounds like an anguished scream somehow, and used to freak me out a lot when I was listening to this song. It's like, ah! I can't really replicate it properly, but it's kind of eerie. There's lots of cool muted echoey picking from multiple guitar lines here, and after the brief instrumental intro, they do this even briefer interlude before the verse. It gets really bare-boned, with just John singing, "You got a great imagination," and the muted guitar picking away with a delay of 3/8 applied to the track. I know this because I've used this many times myself. It's like, if anyone remembers the song Sweet Disposition from like 2009, it sounds freakishly like that, I think. Chris's voice is very prominent in the mix here, and I'd say that's because this song was recorded before it was turned into a Yes song, so probably originally Chris and Billy shared vocal duties on this one. In the pre-chorus, John and Chris do a call and response singing line where you can really clearly hear Chris sing solo for the first time in a very long time. Billy also chimes in now and again with "Wish I Knew." He sounds kind of similar to Squire, just a bit higher though, so these two are a really good match. John, on the other hand, sounds very tacked on in this track. I think this was one of the bits he recorded in his home studio so far away, and there's just too much unnecessary chorus on his voice. Perhaps it's there to disguise the fact that it sounds like he recorded it in his closet or something. He especially sounds distant in the chorus, drowning in chorus. He sings in unison with Chris, so it's clear that it just should be Chris singing in the chorus, but they added John in here to make it yes. Anyway, the chorus has a double chorus arrangement. The first half is more empty and then gets filled up with lots of movement in the second half, with a different melody too. Very hopeful thematically. After a couple of couplets, Howe shows up out of nowhere to do a solo, which is very Howe-esque. Apart from this, there's some really cool riffs from joint guitar and bass. Overall, it's a very cool mood, very hopeful, and I think this was their last charting single. I think it was a minor hit. It does kind of sound like one, for sure. Shame about all the Anderson bits. Fly? From where? Where? Can you fly from here? The third song is Universal Garden. Opens with Howe on classical guitar, playing his arrangement of what eventually will become the verse melody. The rest of the band show up with Sherwood, I assume, doubling up on Steve with his acoustic guitar. The opening is pretty cool and sets up a mystical mood that is carried over to the verses. There's lots of flanger on vocals and synth beds, and the beats from drums and bass are interesting, coming in for solitary hits at odd intervals. And this is largely cast aside with the, I guess you could call, chorus. Drums switch to a steady beat, and overall the song starts sounding more conventional. Beyond the sun, beyond the sky, are where the real questions lie. The mix also gets pretty flat to contrast with the previous ethereal verses. The chords are quite amazing, so unexpected and very lovely, and I want to look at this album especially for some inspiration for future chord progression ideas. After the second chorus, they go into a guitar solo which sounds very cool at the very beginning, and it's almost sexy. It's like, damn! But of course, Steve is Steve. It seems like the only things that Steve Howe did on this album was the solos. Like, hey, everybody, remember me? The lead guitarist from Yes? The lyrics in the bit after the chorus, our time is man-made, our fear is man-made, religion is man-made, love is forever. Like, damn, that's good. I'm digging that. And this is one of the only times where Yes lyrics really resonate with me. Anyway, they go through some more runs of the chorus, varying it up, introducing Steve into the mix, who ruins the mood yet again. But despite that, it ends pretty epically. It's a pretty damn good song. 3 for 3, honestly. Next is No Way We Can Lose. It has a laid-back country-like groove, counting in triplets, and Squire contributes to the folksiness with some distant harmonica work. There can be one answer for us all. It's got a nice fresh chord progression, especially in the chorus. We can all find a way to resolve our differences. There's no way we can lose. We can all realize that there are no differences. There's no way we can lose. Some cool inversions from the bass line, especially playing the root chords in the first inversion, which makes the music sound very significant. Such a cool little sing-along. There's some more of that tinkly bright guitar, which seems to be a trademark of this album. Perhaps is the Billy Sherwood touch. There's also this little line in the lyrics where John goes, "Ready or not?" And these sort of nursery rhyme lyrics appear lots of times in the album, and for some reason it became this recurring theme here. Towards the end, we get the obligatory Steve Howe solo that's wholly unnecessary and never good. Once more, the vocals sound really rich and full, and I'm very, very happy about that. It's a damn good song, and I don't know about you, but this album is turning out pretty solid. Next is Fortune Seller, which opens with a nice did it from vocals, and then we go into the chorusy bass groove of the song, which is incredibly satisfying as well. Then they do a largely a cappella bit singing the main Fortune Seller, Finder, Seeker hook of the song. It sounds better than similar stuff in Keys to Ascension, but still not great, largely due to the odd sound of John's contribution, and not really up to snuff with the standards set for this album, in the previous tracks. The slow groove from drums contrasts with the all-funky bass line, and in addition, the song is in 3/4 time, or 6/4 time, most of the time. And most of the time, White keeps a steady beat going, counting in 2, boom, tsh, boom, tsh, boom, tsh, creating a 6/4 feel. Some more of that good old polyrhythm. Steve Howe comes in now and then and does some soft, jazzy runs, which aren't terrible, and in fact, they're probably the best things that he did on the album. They say that time is like a river that flows, and where that river ends, nobody knows. Lots of river. Well done, John. After going through the delightfully fun verses and choruses, they bring in a new mood about 3 minutes in, which serves as a bridge section. It's more straightforward, a steady 4/4 beat, it's nice and intense. Shame it doesn't last for very long. They rework the main groove lots of times, adding and removing instrumentation, bringing the intensity up and then down. We then get a damn cool organ solo from the Russian Igor Koroshev, who was a guest player on a few tracks on this album. He's a very talented keyboardist that many consider to be the second best keyboardist in Yes's history, behind Rick Wakeman, of course. It's a cool song, but I feel like it outstays its welcome just a bit because it's 5 minutes long, but they could have cut maybe a minute out. Moving on to Man in the Moon, which was largely finished by Conspiracy. There's some nice good old synth strings at the beginning establishing the mood of the song, which is kind of dark and dramatic and serious. The melody and chords are all nice, just that I don't agree all that much with the vocal treatment. It is pretty much just Squire on lead vocals, but like in Open Your Eyes, John doubles up all the way through, singing in unison. And it's clear that Anderson wasn't supposed to be here, and it would have sounded a whole lot less cluttered if he just didn't sing joint lead with Chris. Help me. The song has a solid, smooth groove, and has a similar tempo to New State of Mind. In fact, most of the songs on this album are kind of laid back, and that's nice. They're not boring, and they're still quite powerful, but they ain't headbangers. The pre-chorus, consisting of those amazingly huge vocals, sing silently revolving, wired through the heaven above, on my own. This sounds so good, so good. Very enjoyable dance harmonies. This is exactly my kind of groove. The chorus consists of John singing the line, round and round and round I go, When I stop, no one will know. More nursery rhymes, complementing the music with a childlike innocence, perhaps. And this wonderfully goes against the pretty foreboding chord progression. There's a great dark instrumental bridge section with everyone doing glissandos, musically falling down. The track is a really strong entry, again, but however, there's a pretty long distorted noodling solo from How, which honestly goes on for way too long and feels like the song should have faded out long before. Damn it, ruined another one. Next is WONDERLOVE. It opens with an extended hypnotic loop from acoustic guitars. And round and round and round they go. Steve shows up for some very tasteful sliding, and it's a nice feel all around. After a brief light opening verse with just John saying, "I believe," over the instrumentals, the full band then jump in with a sudden hop in today, hop in tomorrow. And that interesting guitar loop is then taken over by the bass, and it becomes the bass line for the song. Do, 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 do. And this pattern stays incredibly consistent and constant through all the different chords and verses and choruses. It's an odd move to have so relatively little thematic variety, especially coming from Yes, but it works because the music surrounding the bass line changes just enough so you don't really notice the repetitiveness. The switch over from the verse to chorus is one of these changes, in the form of a key change. There you were, like a dream to me, WONDERLOVE. Lots of muted picking from guitar that doubles up with the keyboard strings and creates a very pleasant atmosphere. Then over the course of the chorus, they somehow tastefully move back into the original key. And it's always fun to figure out how to do that. I've done it quite a bit myself. I get into this motif, into this groove, into this perhaps new key, and it's like, how do I get out of here back into the previous bit? Anyway, the next cycle of verse and chorus stays pretty much the same. Thankfully, because it's a solid groove. The second chorus is followed by a fresh, very active, and very fast theme, serving as the bridge. Keys and guitar cycle around, tinkling away, while drums play a fast "We Will Rock You" pattern. It gets unexpectedly dramatic all of a sudden, but it suits the message of the song, I think. So this is the bit in this song where Steve Howe shows up to do a low-effort guitar solo. I guess this is what we have to expect from pretty much every track. In a sense, this album was kind of recorded by a Yes featuring Anderson, White, Squire, and Sherwood, with Howe making a special guest appearance on every track. Anyway, this bit is pretty epic, complete with complimentary powerful lyrics and vocal delivery. They do a hard cut that leads back into the original verse and chorus, and they all tie it up very nicely with a bow at the very end with a reprise of this active bridge section, which is mostly just a guitar solo at this point, but what are you gonna do? Overall, it's one of my favorite tracks on the album actually. A delightful mix of the gentle and sunny and more high energy themes. Nice. Next up is From the Balcony, which is just a duet between Steve on classical guitar and John on vocals. It's a lovely melody. Nice performances from both parties. It's very gentle throughout and easygoing. Pretty good, but there comes a few points where there's a sloppy transition between vocalist interludes from guitar going back into the sung sections, like there wasn't much thought put into it. But it's nice and short, and it's not bad. Anyway, let's get on to the next track, which is Love Shine. For some reason, whenever the backing vocals sing the recurring Shine theme, it sounds like they're singing Shine. It's kind of the same how in the song Don't Cry by Asia, for some reason they sing Don't Cry. Like, why does it sound that way? There's some very modern sounding keys tinkling away, and I think embracing modern synth sounds really was the right way to go, as opposed to Rick Wakeman trying to create a virtual orchestra on Keys to Ascension using some awfully dated patches. Guitar in the back plays a syncopated rhythm on the offbeat. The joint guitar and bass riff remains pretty unchanged throughout the whole song, making the verse and chorus too much alike for my liking. The lyrics are quite lovey-dovey. I won't sleep again until I sleep again with you. Nice, John. Very classy. Chris/Billy, I legit can't tell them apart, do a strong call and response with John, as is the Open Your Eyes tradition, I guess, in the pre-chorus. The chorus itself perhaps has too much chorus in the vocals. It doesn't do much to add to the music, and further makes me think that the band were dissatisfied with the way John Anderson's vocal tracks came out, so they tried to hide it with chorus. We get more nursery rhymes up in this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all good people. And then they don't finish that line, but it's a safe bet that most people will complete the phrase in their head with all good people go to heaven. Lots of customary synth staccato strings that make appearances before are in here as well. It's a nice touch, and it's different from the way the strings were used on keys. Here, it definitely sounds like a keyboard playing a keyboard part on a string sound, rather than what Wakeman did, making it feel like they were too cheap to splurge on a real string section, so they made do with an electronic simulacrum. The Feel the Love bridge section has a different feel from the rest of the song. They visit some chord progressions not seen before in this track, in this little bit. Thankfully, this makes the song a lot less monotonous. There's an extended solo at the end, of course, which maybe makes the song longer than it needed to be, but you simply had to know that Steve Howe was here. It's like he pees on every song to mark his territory. Anyway, it's a very high power song, though it's not all that interesting. The penultimate track, Somehow, Someday, has an acoustically led intro with John delivering a Celtic melody which he had already used in 2 of his solo albums. It's basically the melody from Boundaries of the 1982 album Animation and Or from the 1997 album The Promised Ring. It's actually just some segments straight from Or. It's the same melody and lyrics. But hey, other band members have done this sort of thing before, so I wouldn't be too critical just because this exists the way it does. The intro is a 6/8 Irish lull, which then develops into our 6/4 beat, with drums and bass and guitar playing an overdriven, sluggish waltz-like pattern. That's not even in half time, it's more like third time. It's very sluggish. It's like do 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 do. And it's a 4-chord cycle that repeats throughout the whole song. Again, falling victim to the technique they used in Love Shine, the song really doesn't change up all that much, and there really isn't that big of a change between the verses and the choruses. They both remain equally as forceful, and I'd say that's detrimental to the flow of the song. It makes you feel like you're trapped in an endless loop with no escape. The melody, for one, is pretty nice. That's one thing that you can't really fault this album on, is that the melodies are whack AF. When things started to get a little boring, they bring back the opening Celtic melody and incorporate it into that continuous full band looping arrangement, and it doesn't sound good at all. They mix this very Celtic-inspired 6/8-bit with heavy 6/4 accompaniment, and it's a marriage doomed to divorce. It sounds awfully cluttered, and this time the polyrhythm is a very ill fit, in my eyes at least. In addition, the band occasionally do these sudden upbeats and skips in the rhythm, like, how did I do this? Bum, 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 bum. I know they wanted to make this repetitive motif a bit more interesting and varied to listen to, but this was not the way to do it. After going back to the regular verses, they go back into the Celtic fusion bit as well, and this feels a bit like something out of Union, you know, these 2 unrelated songs Frankenstein together. Anyway, it fades out with a Steve Howe solo, as per frickin' usual. This is probably the weakest track on the album, I'd say, and it could have been a lot better if they kept it nice and simple. We then get to the last track, The Solution. I look at the runtime, and I'm like, 23 minutes? What is this? Is this actually a 23-minute long prog epic? Well, no. We'll get to that soon enough. It's got an interesting opening riff. It goes through unexpected melodic movements, and I think you only hear it one more time later in the song, which is kind of a shame. The opening verse is in 6/8 time. It is very subdued, and just John and dreamy keys playing broken chords in the back. Then we get to the chorus all of a sudden, and the whole band just poofs into existence. Looking for the solution! Some more sharing of vocal duties with the melody, jumping from John to Chris and Billy. The beat takes a backseat, interestingly enough. Very sparse beats coming in now and then, and pretty counterintuitive to not go all out for the chorus. The instrumental running section that comes right after the chorus is rather odd, and almost sounds goofy, but still retains the cool factor. It's in 13/8 time, I think, and it mostly consists of ascending patterns going up like John also shows up briefly to sing "Round and Round We Go," more of those good old children's songs. The second verse has a full band arrangement, but maintains the easygoing nature from the first one. After the second chorus, the band launched into a new section serving as a bridge, with John saying, "Give it in, give it out, give the best you can do, give it in, give it out, it's all to you." It's a heavy groove in 4/4, and it's actually the most active part of the whole song. Very cool. Then they travel through the previous themes in an instrumental interlude, and Anderson shows up again to tell us, "Over and under and down we go." Then back into giving in, giving out, yada yada. The instrumentation is really solid, except for the very tacked on Steve Howe solo. The track kind of falls apart in a good way at the end, and lands on the closing chord on a single acoustic guitar strum. Very nice. Interesting track. It's 5.5 minutes long, so this is the end, right? Why is the runtime on the CD so long? Well, after about 2 minutes of silence, we get the super secret bonus track, which is called The Source. Sound effects of nighttime crickets and birds chirping and ocean tide fade in. It sounds like one of those 10-hour-long YouTube videos of ambient nature sounds designed to make you fall asleep. Occasional soft wind chimes also make their appearance known every now and then. And I'm thinking, just what exactly is this? Suddenly, almost as if it's Freddy Fazbear in prog rock form, you hear the opening vocal harmony line from the opening track, all in a cappella. "Waiting for the moment when the moment has been waiting all the time." And then the reverb decays, and you're left with what came before it, those nature sounds. Then after some time, you get another sampling of vocals from earlier in the album, and then that's gone away. This whole thing consists of snippets of vocals from across the album. In a way, it's a nice way to hear the complexity of all the huge vocal harmonies clearly, and makes you really appreciate just how dense and well executed it all was. And you can almost turn it into a game to see if you can recognize all the various elements, like, oh, this is from this song and this one is from over here. Some samples are just hooks from the chorus, so they're obvious, but others are just sustained ah and the like, and other seemingly random lines from the verses. There's pretty long pauses between all the vocal snippets, so you end up riding the mood led by nature's sound effects chiming away in the back. So this goes on until the end of the CD. It's not necessary listening, and you won't really lose all that much from the album if you don't hear it, but it's interesting. You kind of have to be in the right mindset to listen to it and appreciate it, but hey, it's nice, I like it. So, Open Your Eyes doesn't sound like typical Yes, which of course was a big deal to people at the time, when I guess people just wanted to hear more complex prog, and what they ended up with was basically talk light. You know me, I'm not a purist. I don't get into all that of a huff when a band does something out of its ordinary state of being. I appreciate lots of different types of music, and it's not just hardcore prog, so I found this to be a really enjoyable listen. Really good catchy tunes, but of course not perfect. Anderson and Howe sometimes don't really gel well with what the others are doing. The mixing apart from those odd to John bits is excellent, and you can clearly hear all the instruments and they're all rich in body and personality, despite the mix being a bit crowded at times. Hey, I'ma give it 7.5 out of 10. The haters don't know what they're missing. The album was released in November 1997 because their management team decided to push forward the release date to be pretty much on top of Keys to Ascension 2 for some reason, instead of the original 1998 plan. The album cover is a very simple red Yes logo against a black background. I'd say calling back to their debut album and paying tribute to that design and that album, since this was released right around the 30-year anniversary of the band. It ended up being one of the worst selling albums of the band's career, probably the biggest flop since their debut album. How ironic. It's a toss-up whether Yes fans consider this or Union as the band's most disliked album. Shame. They went on to do a big tour promoting it, and this was the first time that the band went on tour with Steve Howe since Union. Billy Sherwood took up secondary guitar duties, and they brought along Igor Koroshev as the keyboardist, who was well able to play the classic Wakeman era stuff. And by the end of the tour, he was officially christened as the new keyboardist of Yes. The 7th keyboardist of Yes, I think. I might be wrong. So yeah, the album didn't do so hot, but the band decided to push forward, and after the end of the tour, they set to work on their next album. So join me next Sunday/Monday when I'll be discussing their next studio effort, The Ladder. Like and subscribe if you're interested in more music reviews and original music from me. Special thanks to all my patrons, and if you're interested in contributing, there's links to my original music and Patreon in the description below. Thanks again. See you around. It's not you, it's not me, it's whatever you want it to be. Da 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 da. Hey and hello,